Hey there, New Year's and old fears. New Year's resolution? Throw those old fears away. Hey everybody, my name is John and welcome to AUDIBLE, a day in the Word, the internet's favorite Bible study. Man, it feels good to say that again. It feels so good to be back with you all. We ended last year with a bit of a short break, but we are back and better than ever in 2019. Better than ever! And we're starting off this year in January. That's how every year starts. In January, we are going to be walking through the book of James. You know, James, the book that was written by the half-brother of Jesus, a leader in the church in Jerusalem, the book that was written to the 12 tribes scattered among the nations sometime before the AD 60s, which is when James was martyred, the book that kind of looks like a letter but is really more of a greatest hits of James's teaching, the book that was written to both summarize the teachings of Jesus and to encourage a persecuted church. You know, that James. So let's start out today by reading James chapter 1 verses 2 through 22. So what we have here essentially are two ways of dealing with trials and temptations in life, which, it should be noted here, it is assumed that trials and temptations will come regardless of whether you choose to follow Jesus or not. Just because you're a Christian doesn't mean all of a sudden everything's gonna get real easy for you. And the first way of dealing with these trials is described in verses 2 through 4. In this case, the trials lead to the testing of our faith, which leads to perseverance, which then leads us into spiritual maturity. Yeah, that's how I deal with all my problems. I'm so mature. The second path also starts with a trial, but that trial leads to a sinful desire or temptation, which leads to sin and ultimately leads to death. So we see here that the split between these two paths comes right away. When trials come, how do you respond? Do you view this trial as a test of faith and as an opportunity for you to grow deeper in your dependence and relationship with God? Or do you get overwhelmed and let temptation take hold of you, and so you fall into the same sin patterns over and over and over again? I'll be honest, for me, the latter is more of the norm. In fact, if I look back at my life, I have often equated trials with a season of struggle or weakness in my faith. And over time, I've sort of conditioned myself to react to trials in my life in the second, more negative way. And so I start to believe that the trial is the problem. But again, you'll notice that in both scenarios, there are trials. We cannot avoid trials and tribulations in our lives, but we can choose how we deal with them. Really, what James is showing us here is that there's more than one way to process your pain. When your heart is destroyed because a boyfriend or girlfriend broke up with you, there's more than one way to work through that. When you and your parents can't stop fighting, or parents, when your kids just won't listen to you, there's more than one way to process that. But how do we stay on that first path? How do we deal with the trials in our lives in a way that leads us to perseverance and spiritual maturity? Well, luckily, James helps us out with that. Thanks, Jimmy boy. Throughout this chapter, James actually gives us several very practical steps that we can take to help us deal with the trials in our lives in a God-honoring way. For starters, we should ask God for wisdom. And God is faithful to give it. People who respond to trials in their lives well are usually quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry. James instructs his readers to get rid of all evil in their lives so that temptation and sinful desires don't even have room to creep in. And finally, we are instructed to be doers of the word, not merely hearers. The reality is that life is full of trials, tribulations, and difficult seasons. But there is more than one way to process your pain. And if we're not careful, pain can lead us down a path towards sin. Or we can choose to be intentional about how we deal with the pain in our lives. And when we do that, God can actually use that trial. God can actually use that pain to help deepen our dependence on Him and strengthen our relationship with Him. Hey friends, thank you so much for watching. I wanted to take a second and let you know that today's show is brought to you by Audible. Why Audible? Because Audible content includes an unmatched selection of audiobooks, original audio shows, news, comedy, and more from the leading audiobook publishers, broadcasters, and entertainers. I used to read fiction all the time as a kid, but lately as an adult, I just haven't been able to find the time to actually sit down and read. But last year, audiobooks changed that as I started listening to audiobooks on my runs or on a long car ride. It has really helped me fall in love with fiction again. A recommendation I would give you, a great place to start, the best audiobook I read last year was Ready Player One by Ernest Cline, narrated by the incredible Will Wheaton. But of course, with a free trial, you can choose any book you want. That's right. Audible is offering viewers of A Day in the Word a free audiobook with a 30-day trial membership. So just head on over to audibletrial.com/Jorgenson, start browsing the unmatched library of audio content, get your book, and start listening today. Also, as always, I want to give a big shout out and a big thank you to all of our Patreon supporters out there. If you're interested in partnering with this ministry in a financial way for as little as $1 a month, you can become a patron today. All you have to do is visit the link in the description down below. That is all the time I have for you today. I love you all. I'll see you next week. Keep being awesome.